Okay, guys, today we are going to talk about ecological succession. So, in this presentation, we are going to explore that. Now, if you break the word down, ecological, what does it make you think of, right? Ecosystems, ecology, pretty much it's talking about the environment. And succession is when things occur in a particular order. So, that's what ecological succession is the certain particular order that the environment takes to resustain itself. So, ecological succession is a gradual, predictable change to the plants and animals in an ecosystem. Make sure you definitely write that definition down. It is the process by which an area that is completely bare of any vegetation could eventually become a forest. Now, I want you to think about it. Longview is a great example. Have you ever seen a gas station that goes out of business and it just sits there for months, years? And all of a sudden, you can tell that Mother Nature is starting to take over. Grass and trees and bushes are breaking through the concrete. It's getting overgrown. Mother Nature will always take back over if given the chance. And the step by step predictable change that she will do is called ecological succession. Now, there are actually two different types of changes, and sometimes the environment can go through a very abrupt change where a dramatic change to the ecosystem can occur. An example could be a forest fire, flooding, very strong winds or storms like hurricanes, tornadoes, and even volcanic eruptions. When these events occur, they can destroy the ecosystem and leave nothing but bare earth. So Mother Nature has to start over again. So let's review what biotic and abiotic means. You should have learned this in 6th grade. Biotic is living and abiotic is non-living. These factors in an ecosystem work together to help maintain equilibrium or balance, kind of like homeostasis in the body. The process of ecological succession can repair damaged ecosystems to restore this equilibrium and enable life to thrive on. Succession can be either one or two. It can either be primary succession or secondary succession. So we are going to learn the difference between the two and the steps that ecosystem will take. So real quick, a question. Again, answer this in the left-hand side of your column. Succession refers to the progress, predictable long-term changes in an ecosystem. True or false? True. So let's talk about primary succession. Bare rock will first be colonized by the pioneer species that is able to tolerate hostile conditions and makes its own food. So when we talk about primary succession, we're talking about nothing has ever lived here before. No living biotic things. There's not any soil. So the first thing we have to start with is rocks. Well, are rocks living or non-living? They're non-living. They're abiotic. A pioneer species is the first living thing to grow and thrive in an environment. And so we're going to talk about lichen. Okay, some of y'all might pronounce them lichen, but it's actually lichen. Okay, lichen is actually a symbiotic relationship between fungus and algae that can live on bare rock. They produce acids that help to break the rock down into smaller pieces, like you can see here. So lichens are actually living, and they are always going to be the very first primary pioneer species in primary succession. So definitely write that down. They help to create the very first soil. Now we know that most plants have to have soil. So lichens are what come down to break the rock into the tiny little pieces and dirt to create soil. So primary succession is the introduction of organisms into an environment that is not inhabited by any other organism. So an example, bare rock lava after a volcanic eruption or sand dunes. Notice there is no living thing here. So let's go through the stages. Over many years, the soil will get deeper and mosses will start to grow. As the mosses and the lichens start to die, their nutrients is going to be added to the soil to help improve it. So this picture is showing us ecological succession. First, you have the lichen on the rock, which makes soil. Once you have the soil, then we're going to get to our very simple, small grass. I mean, think about it. You're not going to go from rock to bam, large trees. Mother Nature takes time. After the grass, you might get into more complex, simpler organisms like flowers and bushes, then to smaller trees, and then eventually into larger trees. So it's that process of going from small to big. So grasses will eventually replace the moss. The succession progress is going to continue in the habitat change and become less suitable for some species and more suitable for others. Once the ecosystem is established and all the plants are taking hold, then what are going to come in? Then the animals. So these species can thrive and become the next dominant species. They can continue to be the dominant species, or they could be replaced at each stage after hundreds of years when the soil is deep enough and rich enough to support woodlands, which is large trees. This community remains relatively unchanged and is called the climax community. So once an ecosystem has kind of maintained that equilibrium where it's stable and a lot of changes really aren't going on, it's considered to hit its climax community. So, question 2. An area of the woodlands that once has been bare rock. During the process of succession, what would have been the first species to inhabit the area? And you should always know that it is lichen. Okay, so let's talk about the difference between primary and secondary. Secondary succession. Secondary means the second time. So think of like that. It's an event like a fire that may have destroyed an ecosystem, but the dead organic matter surviving organisms may begin the new community. So secondary succession is like it's the ecosystem's second chance to start over. So here's the big difference. In primary succession, no soil is made. They have to start the process with bare rock. In secondary succession, it's the ecosystem's chance to start over again, but the soil already remains. And secondary succession normally occurs after a traumatic event like a forest fire. So the new community could change until it reaches its climax community. This is secondary succession. So ecosystems are constantly changing. Fires, floods, volcanoes, they can occur all over the world. And those would, fires, floods, those would normally lead to secondary succession, where a volcano eruption would be primary because once it clears out, there's no soil. It has to start with bare rock. Without succession, the disrupted ecosystems would never recover, and therefore our Earth would never recover from floods. So what would our world be like if our ecosystems could not recover? Consider a lawn that is constantly being mowed. Why does it never reach a climax community stage? Is it because succession is being interrupted? The plants cannot grow where the grass grows? Or both? This is a tricky one. The answer is the succession is being interrupted. Think about it if your parents aren't mowing their yard constantly. Eventually, those big weeds will come in, and then trees and lots of other things will grow. So succession is not limited to a large area, but can occur all around us. Like when we were outside today, there was succession occurring. We just haven't realized it. A garden could be cleared for vegetation, and concrete area both have the potential of turning into the woodlands. You can see for yourself by observing a cleared area of a garden, like the area where they have mowed lower for our PE field. If they were to leave that alone, do you think Mother Nature would take over? And if grass is there already, what do you think the next stage would be? So which of the following is not true about ecological succession? A parking lot could eventually become woodlands. It enables disturbance and damages ecosystems to repair themselves. Succession results in a stable community called climax community. The first dominant species will remain throughout all stages. It's D. Remember how we talked about some will become more dominant as it goes through different stages. Okay, so summary, you understand the roles of ecological succession and the two different parts. So tomorrow we're going to do a foldable, and after we go outside and look at our things, so we need to understand the difference between primary and secondary. You'll have a good day.